Hello and welcome to my beginner's guide to Kerbal Space Program. I had picked up this contract here to rescue Aldrim Kerbin from orbit about Kerbin. And if we do so, we get a little bit of cash and a little bit of reputation, but more importantly, Aldrim Kerbin is going to be joining our Kerbinaut Corps. And here in the tracking station, we can see Aldrim here in an orbit, low orbit about Kerbin at about an altitude of, 80 kilometers right now. And last episode, we built this rocket to go get him. And you can see aboard we have Jebediah Kerbin and Bill Kerbin. In particular, actually, this is good for Bill because Bill has not been in space yet. So this will earn him a couple of points for experience and we'll get him up to level 1. And one of the things I did with this rocket as well is we got into something new. We talked about fuel flow and we talked about asparagus staging. And if you don't remember, just go back and take a look at that video. You'll see what it's about, but it's the reason you're seeing the yellow fuel ducts here. But this episode is going to be mostly about rendezvousing, so let's get to it. So we're going to go into map view. We're going to take a look here, and we're going to see here's Aldrim here in his orbit of about an altitude of 80 kilometers. Now, when you go to do a rendezvous, what you want to do is actually put yourself into a orbit that is in the same plane, but not necessarily the same altitude as your target orbit. Thankfully, if we scroll down like this, you can see that the plane of Aldrim's orbit is right over the equator. And that's the easiest orbit for us to get into. We just have to go due east. Talked a lot about going into orbit in the past. If you need to, refresh yourself on that video. Today, though, we're just going to be talking about how do we get to him. So what you want to do is get yourself into an orbit of a different altitude. Now, because your altitude will be different than your target's altitude, your ship will be going at a different speed. And in fact, the higher your altitude, the lower your speed will be as you trade off that gravitational potential energy for kinetic energy. So what you want to do is either one, get into an orbit where you are lower in altitude than your target, but you are behind the target. Again, lower altitude means you'll be going faster, and then that will allow you to catch up. Or, alternatively, you could go into a higher orbit, and remember that means you'll be going slower, but you put yourself ahead of your target so that the target will catch up to you. The way you want to do it is up to you. However, at an altitude of only 80 kilometers, remember that the atmosphere extends up to an altitude of 70 kilometers. There's not a lot of wiggle room between 80 kilometers and the top of our atmosphere at 70 kilometers. So in this particular circumstance, our options below the altitude of our target orbit are rather limited, so I'm going to go above. And I'm thinking I'm going to go for an orbit of about 120 kilometers. That will give us a nice separation between the two orbits so that you can see the difference. Now, in order for us to do that, again, I'm going to be at a 120 kilometer orbit. I'm going to be going slower. So that means that we should be launching so that we are going to be ahead of Aldrim, and then Aldrim can catch up to us. But if we look here, this is us right here on the surface, and you can see that Aldrim's actually just coming above us, well, right about now. So we're actually, by the time we get up there, he'll be moving along. He's going at a pretty good clip at 2,279 meters per second. By the time we get up to altitude, he's going to be well ahead of us. So what we're going to do is we're just going to time warp and until he sort of gets in behind us here again. And there's no reason to be too precise. You just want to make sure that you are going to end up being ahead. Oh, let's see here. We'll stop around now. Again, you can see there was no precision in what I just did there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go into a standard 120 kilometer orbit. So, SAS on, throttle up, and let's punch it. And while we're ascending here, we'll also take a little bit of time talking about asparagus staging, but I want to get my gravity turn kind of going right before we do that. And I wait till I'm about, 50 meters per second or so for my surface speed, and then we're going to pitch over a few degrees. And we're going to lock it onto the prograde vector. And we're just going to let this thing kind of do its thing. And what I want to draw attention to is notice all 4 of these engines are firing right now, yet this tank that's attached to this engine is staying full while this tank is being drained rapidly, and that's thanks to this fuel line that is right here. And all 4 of these engines are actually, in fact, completely running off of that one tank. And pretty soon that tank is going to be empty, and then at that point, we stage, and then we continue on with the other 3 tanks. And now we're running off of these tanks, yet this tank is remaining full. Also, what happened here is our core engine clicked on there as well. So that's thanks to our Asparagus staging, making this a far more efficient use of our engines than otherwise you would have with more traditional types of staging. Anyway, I do have to take a look where we're going for an altitude of 120 kilometers. Alright, here we go. 120 by 120. We can now lose our core stage here, leaving us with just our orbiter. Alright, so let's go set up our rendezvous. So, let's turn off that debris that we have happening there. We don't need to be looking at that. We only need this. There we go. So we are in our 120 kilometer orbit. We are at an altitude that's higher than our target. So that means, again, our target's going faster than us. It will be catching up to us. But of course, we not only have to have it catch up to us, we need it to be in its orbit at the same time that it catches up with us. In order to do that, we have some tools to help us out. If we select our target, we have this option here. Just left click on it and set as a target. And the target orbit now goes this nice yellow color. And if I go ahead of where my trajectory is, not anywhere in particular here, and add a maneuver node, I can start bringing that. I'm going to put in some retrograde, which of course is bringing down my periapsis. And my target here is to bring down that periapsis so that it matches our target periapsis. There we go. Our target altitude. Now, as you can see here, we got these 2 new icons that just popped up here. We have this icon here, which is the target position at intersect 1, which means this is our closest approach to the, when we're at our closest approach to the target, this is where our target is going to be. The other one is telling us where we're going to be. Not only where we're going to be, but if I right click on it, it'll stay there for me. It's telling me that we're going to be 339.5 kilometers apart at that point. That's not good. I need these 2 to be as close together as I can get them. So we need to manipulate our maneuver node. I'm going to go click on that graphics view to get some nice fine control. And we're going to give ourselves some more retrograde. I want to show you what happens here. Notice that after a certain point, we not only get this these orange icons, we also now have a secondary closest approach. And that's because, here, I'll really exaggerate it here by giving myself a lot of retrograde. Now my periapsis is well below the target's periapsis, so you can see what's happening here is we're crossing his orbit. Our target's orbit once here, we're going below the target orbit, and then we're coming up again around here, crossing it a second time. So what you want to do, actually, the right place to have this is just, again, we just want our periapsis to just touch the target orbit, and you can tell when that happens just when those purple ones disappear. Okay, how do we get these 2 to be together? Well, the problem, what we need to do is adjust the timing of this burn. We need to burn at the right time so that when we come around and get to here, our target will be there as well. When we do that, well, we can just simply grab the maneuver node. I'm going to do that, and I'm just going to start pulling it along. And in fact, why don't we right click back on here so you can see the distance. Notice here it says our closest separation is 333 kilometers. But if I grab this and pull it, you can see that that number is going down. We've got some purple ones coming up. We'll deal with that in a second. See, as I come around, burning later and later, it's now 170, 160, 150. And we're going to keep adjusting the timing until they are as close as we can get them to be. That's getting pretty close there. Might stop with this Okay, we're now here 40. We can do better though. Now it's 4.4 kilometers. Again, notice the purple one showed up, so that's telling me actually I'm burning a little bit too much in the retrograde direction. So I'm going to reduce the scale here a little bit, so I'm only adjusting these by half meter per second intervals. We're going to add a little bit of prograde, again, just to the point where that kind of disappears. And now what I'm actually going to do is actually use these little buttons here to adjust the time in much more finer increments. Each time I push this button, we're going to go up or forward in time 5 seconds. So let's see what that does. 5 seconds forward. Oh, that's a little bit smaller. 5 seconds again. And we just keep doing that. Little tiny adjustments. Oh, and notice that I got to a point where it went too far. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the time interval. We're going to come back a little bit. I'm now going in 1 second increments. So 3 kilometers, 2.9 kilometers, 2.8 kilometers, 2.8 seems to be about it. We're going to try and put a little bit more retrograde on there. So clicking the retrograde button. Again, just to the point where those purple ones show up. Purple ones show up, that means we're burning too far in the retrograde direction, so a little bit prograde. Okay, 3.6 kilometers. Let's adjust the timing again, and you go back and forth until you get this as close as you can, or until your patience run out. And my patience is just about running out. Now we got it down to about 2.3 kilometers for our closest approach. The reason why there's a difference here, there's these two other icons that show up, the descending node and the ascending node, the AN and the DN. You only need to look at one of them because they'll always be the same angle. Let's look at the descending node. You can see negative 0.3 degrees. Our orbit is tilted to our target's orbit by 0.3 degrees. That's why we're only getting into 2.3 kilometers. If you want to, you can change that, but there's actually no need, so I'm not going to bother. So what we got here is a tiny little burn, only 33.5 meters per second, and this burn's going to be in 31 minutes and 40 seconds, so let's get to it. And don't forget that if you're in an orbit that is below the altitude of your target orbit, you're going to be going faster, and that means you're going to want to launch so that you end up behind your target. And setting up the rendezvous is pretty much the same story, except this time you're going to be wanting to increase the altitude of your orbit, so you're going to be burning prograde rather than burning retrograde. But otherwise, the two situations are dealt with in very much the same way. Alright, we are approaching a minute from our burn now, so let's get ourselves ready by putting ourselves onto the blue maneuver node icon. Again, no buttons for this because Jebediah being only a level 1 pilot and us being in career mode, we have to earn the ability to do that, and we've not done enough as of right now. And I like to watch this from map view, and what I also like to do is right click on our intersect indicators here so I can keep an eye on them. I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. Now the burn's going to take about only 3 seconds at full thrust, so I'm not going to go full thrust. Instead, what I'm going to do is wait till I'm about 3 seconds away from the burn and go at about half thrust. That gives me a little bit finer control. I don't have, full thrust for 3 seconds is going to be pretty hard to hit exactly right. Again, I'm playing around a little bit. You could also lock this on retrograde too. It probably would work absolutely fine. I'm sure that's fine. Okay. So let's see, 6 seconds, 5 seconds, 4, 3, let's do it. Half thrust. And then as I get towards the end of this, I'm going to slow down. And we're going to do the last bit of this. We're going to get rid of the node. And we're going to do the last bit of this without looking at the maneuver node, but instead just looking at this. Again, it tells us here, got a lot of things clicked here, but still 5.5 seconds. I should be able to get down about 2.3, so I'm going to burn a little bit more. Remember, we underburned deliberately, so I can just watch this from here. There we go. And I feel I can get that more precisely than I can by watching the maneuver node. So 2.3 kilometers. Okay, we're going to be there in about 18 minutes and 10 counting seconds. Now, we have another tab over here that we've not yet used. This one's really, really useful. As we click here, approach info for Adram's debris, it gives us some information here. Number one, there are 2 intersects. We don't have a second intersect. That's why there's NAs there. And we have this number here, which is telling us our closest approach to greater accuracy than what we're getting over here. And we're also being told the time to our closest approach. It's really handy to have this information. We don't need to be in map view now watching this. We can watch this now from here, which of course is much, much prettier. So let's time warp until we are closer. I'm going to time warp till we're about, I would say, 3 minutes away or so. Oh, and we can start to see there's Abrams debris coming from below us. It feels like I know that it just kind of blew past us, but then it's going to come, remember we're coming from above, it's going to come to, it's orbital mechanics are fun. It'll come back to us as we approach here. Okay, so we are closing in on it. And it has to do with our trajectories being very different from each other. Okay, so here we are about 3.5 minutes away from our closest intercept. And our nav ball has changed now, not orbit, not surface, but target. It did that automatically. You can change this manually by clicking on it, but target is what we want. This 36 meters per second in climbing is our speed now relative to our target. It's how quickly we are approaching it. As well, the purple icon is directly towards the target. There we go. And this is telling us our speed. So the fact that these two are not lined up is telling us actually we're going to be missing it. But what's more useful, because we're going to need to slow down, is if we flip around 180 degrees, this is our retrograde direction to target. In other words, if I put it on there, we are now pointing straight away from our target. And this is our speed relative to the target in a retrograde direction. We want this yellow retrograde vector to be very close, much closer than it is now, to the purple target icon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the bird nav ball like that. And if I burn, what I'll do is I'll end up pushing this retrograde icon away from this. So I'll show you what I mean here. We're going to do a little bit of a burn. And you can see that it's moving towards the purple icon. And I'm just going to cut it. We don't have to be perfect right yet. We also, by the way, shedded some of this velocity as we are coming towards it. Now, our paths are curved, so don't expect to actually, when you're quite a ways out, like we are still about 5 kilometers away, for these two to be right on top of each other. That would be true if we were all traveling straight lines, but we are not. We are traveling curved orbits. So this is good enough for now. What I do want to take a look at, though, is our closest approach here. Notice that it is now 146-ish meters. So in other words, it's about half a kilometer, not the 2.3 kilometers it was before. And if you want to, you can play around with, like for instance, if I go here and start burning, this is with a bit of experience, I start to learn which way to go. If I go here and do a little bit of burning, what I want you to do is watch this intersect distance. We'll burn that. And notice it's coming down. It's coming down. I'm burning very, very little. I'm going to keep going in this direction as long as this is still going down. But eventually, you'll find it's starting to stall a little bit. See, it's not going down as quickly. And now it's starting to go up again, so I cut it. Okay, so that's as much I would want to burn in that direction. Maybe if I came over this way and burned a little bit. Let's see what that does. So again, burning. Oh, it's coming down again. Again, I'll go. Oh, now it started to stall out. I noticed it was starting to creep back up again, so we're going to stop that. Notice again, we're not on that, right? It's because of our curved path. In fact, what you will find after doing a few of these is as you approach, the retrograde vector will come down towards it as these two approach the horizon. That seems to be the most common pattern. Anyway, we're still about 3 minutes away, so let's time warp ourselves a little bit closer. Okay, we're now about 1.5 minutes away, and now you can see these two have moved apart quite a bit, so we're going to push them back together again. And now that we're closer, we are shooting to get these two really close to each other like that. There we go. Our closest approach now is about 64 meters, not kilometers, meters. We push it a little this way. Nice. I'm watching this here on the nav ball. Closest approach now about 32 meters. Let's actually just put it right on here. That's actually pretty good. We're coming very, very close to them. And we're keeping an eye on this time. You want to make sure that you can always make this time go up. Because if you're at full thrust and this time is still going down, well, sorry, you're going to blow right by your target. If you want to, if you're getting yourselves a little bit bored, don't speed towards it. Instead, time warp and get yourself closer. So I'm going to time warp until I'm about 30 seconds away now. Again, I'm looking at the nav ball here. I'm going to start pushing that retrograde onto the purple icon, and I'm also watching my time there. It's going up. Notice I pushed it up to, now it's at about 40 seconds. As long as I can keep pushing it up, I'm doing fine. I won't go blowing by my target. Going by to here, again I pushed it up to 44 seconds. Put these two right on each other. We're coming in and a nice, notice all the way through this, I'm not really watching my speed, but my speed is coming down relative to the target. It's now down to 4.6 meters per second. But the two things I'm really watching are this distance here. I want to keep that small, and the time especially. I'm really watching that. Okay, we're about 20 seconds from closest approach, so let's burn again. Push that towards it. That increases our time a little bit. I pushed it a little bit too far. We'll go back this way. Put the two right on top of each other. Come back to here. We're about 20 seconds away. We're coming within, less than a meter now. Units have changed to millimeters. Let's actually bring down our speed even more. 22 seconds away. We can lock this right on there if we want to. Okay, let's zero. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to zero out that speed. I could play around with. I went a little bit too far, but we're going 1 meter per second, 0.1 meter per second away from them. So we are nice and close now to our target. Now it's time to EVA Uldrum and find out, well, what is Uldrum about here? I like to put, by the way, my capsule pointing it northwards. I find it makes it easier to get into the hatch with that. So in order to take a look and switch from this vessel to this vessel, we actually use the square bracket keys. If I push the square bracket key, I switch to this vessel. If I push it again, I go back to this. And you can use either the left square bracket or the right square bracket. It affects which way you cycle through. Considering we have two vessels, it doesn't matter which way you cycle through. So I'm going to put myself onto here, and here comes Uldrum Kerbin. Uldrum Kerbin is an engineer, so we've picked up a companion for Bill. We're going to hit EVA, just like that. We've set our capsule tumbling. That's okay. We're going to hit RCS so that he will activate his jetpack. We're also going to put on some lights. Let's talk a little bit about jetpacking. Yeah, so jetpacking controls are, there's, let's, the W key is going forward. Like here, we can watch it from here. He always moves himself. What if I take off the SAS? There we go. W moves him forward, see that? And the S key moves him backwards. The A key moves to the side, to the left, the D key this way. You can rotate him with the Q and the E keys like that. All right, now in all of that, I probably got myself moving away from him. With the SAS, if you have the SAS toggled on, it will always orient itself so that the Kerbal, you are behind the Kerbal, which kind of makes the flying easier. If you turn the SAS off, then it doesn't orient so that you end up being behind the Kerbal all the time. See how that works? So flying is easiest if you're behind the Kerbal. It takes a little bit of practicing. Now, you might be our heights are a little different. Well, we have the control key. The control key is for going down, and the shift key is for going up. This is the left control and the left shift. So we got to find the hatch. A little bit of practice. You can zoom around doing this pretty easily. There's the hatch. You can see the ladder there. There we go. I got to come up a bit, so that's the left shift key to come up a bit, and then we come in closer. And at some point, we'll get a message here to press F to grab. So we press F to grab, and now we're holding on. And we can use the W and S keys to climb up and down the little ladder that's here. But now it's just going to be, notice as we get close to the hatch, it says B to board, so B, board, and we are now aboard. We have rescued Uldrum Kerbin. Well, not quite just yet, of course. In order to complete our contracts, if we go over here to the very right here, we have a tab for opening up how we're doing with our contracts. This one I don't care about. That's for another day. Plant a flag on the moon. Today we're rescuing Uldrum Kerbin. We have saved him, but we need to rescue Uldrum to get him back down to the surface, and that means to recover him on the surface of Kerbin, of course. And getting back down to the surface is something we talked about back in the Getting to Orbit video, link in the information tab. So I'm going to take this opportunity to thank my newest patron, Joe O'Brien. Thank you, Joe, for joining the team. And thank you to all of my patrons whose regular support helped me to continue to produce these videos on a regular basis. And I'll also take this opportunity to quickly recap the main ideas behind doing a successful low orbit rendezvous. Number one is to time your launch so that once you achieve your orbit, you'll either be a little bit ahead or a little bit behind your target, depending upon whether you are in a lower orbit or a higher orbit. Then what you want to do is create a maneuver node that just gets your orbit to just touch your target's orbit, and then time that maneuver node so that the closest approach indicators are as small as you can make them. Perform the burn, and then as you approach your target, begin herding in that retrograde vector so that it ends up eventually right on top of that purple target icon. And then finally, just as you approach your target, you want to zero out that relative velocity just as you come on alongside your target. And with that, I'd like to thank you for watching. I hope you found this video useful, and I hope to see you again next time.